There's a lot of talk right now about the Big 12 trying to expand and add Arizona and Arizona State and Utah, maybe Washington, Oregon State, Stanford, Cal, whoever those schools are. Doesn't make any sense, okay? The Pac-12 breaking up to join the Big 12 is like burning down your McDonald's so that you can put a Burger King in the same spot otherwise. Nothing against Burger King, nothing against McDonald's, but they're both fast food hamburger places. Right now, there is a monster drop-off after the SEC and the Big Ten. And the Big 12 and the Pac-12, whether they are standing alone or whether they are together, are still hamburger joints. They aren't fundamentally changing anything. And so I don't understand why anybody in the Pac-12 would say, hey, we're standing in Burger King right now. Let's burn down Burger King so we can go over to McDonald's. It just doesn't make any sense, or vice versa. And look, we can toss in a Wendy's, whatever your favorite burger place is. There's a big drop-off between, let's be honest, high-end steakhouse chain. Let's say that right now the SEC and the Big Ten are like Ruth's Chris or Fleming's, or they are Morton's, whatever big steak chain you like. That's where the Big Ten and the SEC are. There's a big drop-off between that and the fast food burger chains, but the fast food burger chains in the Big 12 and in the Pac-12 don't make a lot of sense. And so, every school has to figure out what exactly they're going to do. And what I have said from the get-go is the number one cardinal rule you have to understand when it comes to conference realignment is nobody takes less. In order to expand, it has to make the pie bigger, or at minimum, at least make the pie the same size so that nobody is taking less. USC and UCLA increase the Big Ten pie. Right now, the only other school that I believe would increase the Big Ten pie is Notre Dame. And Notre Dame has to decide whether or not they want to be a member of a conference. If they do, probably makes the most sense for them to be in the Big Ten. And if Notre Dame were to join the Big Ten, I think they could have their pie and eat it too, to go a little Marie Antoinette on you, because NBC has all the Notre Dame home games. Fox could take all the Notre Dame road games as a part of a Big Ten television package, or NBC could buy a part of the Big Ten television package and take all of Notre Dame's road games as well. Fox could be in partnership with them. Notre Dame is right now, to me, the linchpin in how exactly all of this is going to break down. If Notre Dame decides that they want to be in the Big Ten, then the Big Ten is not going to stay sitting where they are right now at 16 schools. They will add at least one more school to get to 18, okay? Maybe they'll add 3 more to go to 20. Washington and Oregon, maybe. Maybe they could continue to go west. I actually think the Big 12 and the Pac-12 at this point don't have as many schools that have as much value. I actually think the ACC is the most intriguing conference to look at right now. Because if you believe, as I do, that the SEC and the Big Ten are the two 800-pound gorillas, and the SEC is in partnership with ESPN, and the Big Ten is in partnership with Fox, the battleground going forward is actually, to me, not the Big 12 or the Pac-12. It's the ACC. And in particular, the battleground is, what would the North Carolina and Virginia schools decide to do? There are many different directions this could go. First of all, the ACC is locked up until around 2036 under a grant of rights deal. Unless I actually am able to read the grant of rights deal, I don't want to say that that precludes anybody from being able to move from the ACC. What do I mean by that? Well, there's oftentimes a lot of loopholes in these contracts. And so everybody says, well, they can't go anywhere. And then the actual data reflects, when you read the grant of rights, oh, there's big loopholes here. This is what happened in the Big 12 back when Texas A&M and Missouri ended up leaving the Big 12, when Colorado left when Nebraska went to the Big Ten, there was a lot of issue in the Big 12 with how all of these different conferences were actually restraining themselves. If the ACC grant of rights is not as solid as people think, then I think the battleground becomes Virginia and North Carolina. Because so far, the SEC and the Big Ten have not encroached on each other's territory. But if the Big Ten decided to come in and try to add ACC schools, then what I believe is that the SEC would fight the Big Ten over that. And that would come down to UNC, that would come to North Carolina, that would come down to Virginia, and maybe Virginia Tech and NC State too. It's possible that UNC and UVA, because they are elite academic institutions, could prefer to go to the Big Ten. But culturally, I believe that those schools are better fits in the SEC. And maybe NC State and Virginia Tech come along with them, because if you will remember back in the day, Virginia Tech got into the ACC because the then governor of Virginia said, if you don't take Virginia Tech, we're going to have major issues politically here in the state of Virginia. And that is how Virginia Tech ended up getting in the ACC. So the battlegrounds to me could be Virginia and North Carolina. There could also be plays involving Florida State, involving Clemson, involving Georgia Tech. And here is the wrinkle, and again, I will probably write on this in the next few days. My understanding is the grant of rights ceases to exist if a majority of ACC schools want out of the ACC. In other words, if there is a run on the ACC, the grant of rights agreement ceases to exist. This is my understanding. If a majority of the ACC schools are no longer willing to stay in the ACC. Now, does that mean 7? Does that mean 8 counting Notre Dame? I would want to read the actual grant of rights that has been signed. But to me, a lot of people are missing that the real realignment battleground is the ACC, because there's more value there. Now, there's also the complicating factor for the Big Ten of everyone needs to be an elite school in order to join the Big Ten. Would that mean that Clemson and Florida State, for instance, are off the table for the Big Ten? I think probably so. So, there is a lot of moving parts right now that are worth paying attention to, but the potential battleground is not the Big 12, and it's not the Pac-12. It's not McDonald's, and it's not Burger King. It is the ACC, where there are some really tasty expansion morsels potentially for play if the SEC and the Big Ten end up going to war over those schools.